All right, so let's talk about the book. First of all, what you should know, if you're a biologist, you should read the book. It's not the easiest to read. It is in Old English, so you know the way that the phrasing is done is a little different. You can get used to it. He also has a tendency to harp on ideas and kind of explain it over and over again. Again, the thinking is if I give you enough information, then you should kind of be able to understand what I'm saying. But what I want you to get out of it, really, there are two main points from the book. One is the descent with modification we kind of talked about earlier. And then the second one is the idea of natural selection. Now, what I want you to understand again is evolution is not new. It wasn't Darwin's idea. The hard part is nobody could explain how evolution can work. So natural selection is Darwin's mechanism to make it work, and it works. And again, Lamarck came up with the idea of the inheritance of acquired traits. That was a mechanism, which didn't work. It isn't true, does not work. But at least he was trying. Actually, Lamarck was, my understanding, was a very good zoologist. Actually, had a lot of great ideas, and unfortunately, the one he's remembered by is the one that he that is wrong and always uses as an example. So yeah, so I guess that's lesson for you in life is don't screw up big time, or they may be talking about you for years for the one thing that you screwed up on. So anyway, so what we want to do is talk about what does the book say. So the idea is descent with modification again, and we've talked about this. What's kind of cool is over on the left, he kind of drew this tree of life, and he's trying to figure this out. And you can see that we have this ancestor down here, and we have these branchings, and then we see these letters A, B, C, D. And he thinks what this is evolution, where things branch out. And then these A, B, C, and D are species that we're seeing today. And these other little lobes or whatever are species that existed then have gone extinct, what the fossil record is showing. And so over on the right is one of the examples that is often used and that's the descent of elephants. And you can see the three elephants today, the species that of the living elephants, and then the mammoth and some of the other ancestors that have gone extinct. The little dagger is suggesting extinction. And then you can see their closest relatives, which if you look at them are not very similar. One is the hyrax, and one is the manatee. And so these guys, so these would be like, you know, maybe B and C or something. And then you get down here and then, you know, D could be, you know, these three, it could be D, E, and F. And then maybe A is the manatees or something, you know. So I'm just trying to show you where are different species, I guess. But that's kind of the concept. So this little drawing that he drew actually does work. And artificial selection. So this is the book's example, is if you look at all these different types of things we eat, these vegetables, they're all really from one plant, and that is the wild mustard plants. And what's happened is we as people have decided that we want stuff. And so we have bred these plants to encourage one thing, either the apical tip or buds or leaves or stems or flowers, whatever that be. And over time, we have kind of put them to where we want them to be. So broccoli is nothing more than an immature flower, but it's a huge flower and thick. And we've done that because it works. And so remember that Darwin was a gentleman farmer, or at least his dad was. So he was on a farm. So he understood the idea of artificial selection, where you pick which cattle you're going to breed because it gives more milk or more meat, which chickens you're going to pick because they lay more eggs. So he got that concept. He also was a pigeon fancier, so he actually artificially selected pigeons himself. And so he understood this process. The other thing I should let you know is, and I don't want to forget to say this, so I'll say it now, is that when Darwin got on the HMS Beagle, he took really kind of two books with him. He took Charles Lyell Principles of Geology, and technically he took, volume 1 and 2. So that was one book that he had with him. The other book he had with him was the Bible. He was a clergyman, and he took his Bible, and it had been written in and underlined and all those things. So again, I want to make sure you understand. He understands the nature of what that would mean, of putting out this idea. When he got back, this was out, and he had gotten hold of it. Him and actually Wallace is actually mentioned also. We had read it. Was this essay on the principle of populations. And so what I want you to know about this is this was put out, and then the idea behind it was about poorhouses. This he was about populations. He was a sociologist, and what he realized is the population, he thought, in humans doubled every 25 years, and if that included, it would bankrupt the crown, and people would starve. So he argued against poorhouses, that basically that you should let people starve. You should not feed them, because if you feed them, there will not be enough food for everybody else, which very cruel, and again, he didn't write it as this is definitely what we should do, but this was a concept that what would happen. So Darwin thought, okay, well, that's human. What about organisms? And he could see how that would work. So he came up with these ideas. So what I'm going to give you now, and this is a little confusing maybe, but Ernst Mayr, who is an evolutionary biologist, went through the origin of species and came up with 5 statements and 3 inferences to kind of sum up the book. And so I want you to know what those are. And so what I'm going to do is currently right now, I'm going to give you some of them. So we're going to listen. So again, this is about Charles Darwin's book. This is how Ernst Mayr has interpreted it. Again, the 5 statements and the 3 inferences. So to start with, we'll go observation number 1 was all species have the ability to increase exponentially. And that's what the picture down at the bottom is supposed to show. This is a puffball. It's a type of fungus. And you can see all those little things coming out of it are spores. Each one of those can turn into an individual mushroom, fungus. And so the idea is that all species have this ability just to kind of explode and take off. But what we tend to find in nature, for the most part, is populations remain the same. Although they are breeding like they should exponentially, most populations tend to remain the same. And then the third one is resources are limited. So there's some resource, either food, water, place to live, whatever those are, they are limited. And so the inference for this is that production of more individuals that can possibly survive lead to a struggle for survival. So this is where you get the survival of the fittest. And we should talk a little bit later about what means fit in Darwin terms. Okay, so the reason I told you about Malthus right before this slide is because this is really Malthus. All of this right here is stolen, taken, paraphrased from Malthus. So it's in the origin of species, but it really is kind of ideas that Malthus put in his essay. Okay, so it's the next page that really kind of sets it off about organisms, but if you look at it, individuals vary. And here we have a bunch of ladybird beetles, and you can see how they differ quite a bit. And then much of the variation is inheritable. So we get that from before. So 2 inferences: the individuals who inherit the best traits for the environment are likely to leave offspring, and the difference will lead to a gradual change in the population. And so that is that adaptation idea I showed you on the last little video. Okay, so again, none of this seems to be rocket science. It's all pretty straightforward but the strange thing about it is nobody had kind of put it together and linked it this way. And this does work. It explains a natural selection. There have been problems over time on explaining certain things. Darwin hated the peacock, the male peacock, because he at first could not explain how that tail would actually be a benefit for the male. And we will look at that in a minute. And actually, there is benefit. So anyway, let me do the fitness thing here because I always forget. Biological fitness, survival of the fittest is great. That's what you hear. But I want to make sure you know what fit means. And fit is actually what's best adapted. It's not necessarily the fastest or the strongest. It's really about having kids. So I'm going to tell you, if you are biologically fit, the name of the game is to have kids for every species on the planet. And we're telling you not to have kids or have less kids because of human population, which is true. We are way over. But reality is, I want to make sure you understand that the name of the game of all species on this planet is to have kids. So for you to be the fittest is you to have the most children. So it doesn't have to be the strongest, the fastest in animals. It doesn't have to be any of that. It has to be who has the most kids. Who has the most kids win. I have a daughter. So I am probably fitter than most of you. Some of you might have kids. I don't know you that well. The problem is I am not fit yet. And you're looking at me like you're old. Shut up. But reality is fit. I will be fit when my daughter has a kid, because that means that I have gotten my genetics into the next generation and I have won the game. So that is really what biological fitness is. And with that, we will stop the share, and you should go out and have kids.